Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. My guest today is going to be Troy Murphy. He's one of my really good friends, known him a really long time. Troy was a mogul skier on the U.S. ski team for over 6 years. He was a U.S. national champion, one of the best in the world, and he also represented the U.S. in the 2018 Olympics. Troy is also now the head coach for Park City Freestyle's mogul team and an avid big mountain skier and filmer. He also has a vintage Mainer alter ego named Donnie Pelletier. I hope you enjoy In the Arena and Troy's journey of successes and failures so far. We are live. Ladies and gentlemen, Troy Murphy.
How are we doing?
Doing excellent. Thanks for coming on, dude, doing the first episode. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Now, we've known each other for a long time, but for some people out there that might not know Troy Murphy, why don't you just give us a little quick rundown?
Yeah, my name is Troy Murphy, obviously. I'm originally from Maine, from small town Bethel, Maine, and grew up out skiing was my passion for my whole life. So ended up competing for years after high school, made the U.S. ski team in mogul skiing, and then went to the 2018 Olympics in moguls. And then since then, I've been kind of doing a little more school and skiing for fun. And yeah, that's kind of the very brief story.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Now, one of the crazy things when I was looking up and checking out Bethel, it's a town of like 2,700 people. So it's pretty small. And for you to be one of four people, essentially every 4 years that gets to represent the U.S. in the Olympics, to come from such a small place like that is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I think it is for sure. It's a small ski town, so that it's definitely like that classic town where the population fluctuates depending on the time of the year. Obviously, there's a lot more people in the winter there, but for me, it was like an ideal place to come from because it's not very saturated with a lot of athletes like that, and so I was able to get a lot of support from the community. A lot of people were, I think, more kind of invested in my journey than maybe they would have been if they were from like a Park City where you can throw a rock and hit an Olympian or like an X Games athlete, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
I was super lucky to grow up there. It was a very small town community, and it was like that classic analogy where, it's like the village raises the athlete, I guess, would be the situation.
Now, how did you get started into it? Was it Nancy or Matt that started getting you on the slopes?
Both of them, I think. Both my parents were skiers, but not like avid, but they were just like anything that I guess they didn't let me when I was a little kid, like kind of inhibit any of their activities. Like They would sandwich me on a dirt bike and go for like dirt bike rides. I remember that being really little. Same thing on like a snowmobile. So I think it was like pretty much whatever they wanted to do outside, they would find a way to get me out there. So I started skiing like they would have me in a backpack and they would ski, and then I graduated to like the tether where like they put the tether around your waist and just hold you back so you don't go like careening down the mountain. So right. I think it was both of them. Yeah, it wasn't one or the other per se.
Now, how did you kind of happen upon moguls?
I've always been like the type of kid who was drawn to like tricks and being in the air and things like that. Like I used to do a thing in my room called the jumping game where I would, like, when I was really little, I'd jump on the bed for hours. And then I'd get like a trampoline. So I spend like the whole summer on the trampoline. So I've always been drawn to that sort of sport. And then I remember like being a kid when I saw like skiers going through the park or like off the jumps in the mogul course. I was like, that's the coolest thing ever. I wanted to do that. So that's kind of how I like sparked my interest in it. But then the local coach and at Bethel at Thunder River, Jeff Yingling, he was the director of the freestyle program, and he actually rode dirt bikes with my family, with my parents and I. And so,
nice.
Yeah, he saw me riding dirt bikes one day and was like, that kid would probably be a good fit for freestyle skiing. And so he kind of invited me to join the team for a couple of days.
How old were you then?
I think like probably 10 or 11, something like that.
Okay. Now, how far is the mountain from where you grew up?
Like 10 minutes.
10 minutes is pretty quick.
So
ride over there.
So we would ski, but we would maybe ski once a week, like on the weekends, or maybe not even. I don't really know. But once I got involved in that ski program, took a couple days to get the hang of it, but once I got hooked and made some friends, then it was like, game on every weekend for sure, and as many days as possible.
Sounds like it was a pretty small program at Gould.
Actually, back then it was kind of big. Like they had some guys who I think at that point were like on the NORAM tour. They had guys like Marty Odlin, he was on the U.S. ski team for some time, and Jackie Peso, who's now on the Freeride World Tour. She came out of that program, so yeah, no, it was actually pretty big. Like we had a team room that everyone would base at in the weekends, and I bet there were like probably 30 to 40 kids around. That would be my guess.
Yeah, no, it's pretty good size, especially
Yeah.
compared to a lot of other places. That's actually a pretty good, pretty big program.
Yeah, for sure. Back then it was, and then it kind of tapered off as I approached high school. But we still had I had a really good group of friends that were doing it, which I think made a big difference.
So around like 10, around that age, like did you start to get more serious and more focused on it, or were you pretty generic in like all different areas when it came to skiing?
Like as far as just focusing on mogul skiing versus everything else.
Exactly. Yeah.
I was very focused on anything freestyle related, but not necessarily just moguls. So it was like moguls, park pipe, anything like that. I loved doing. It was probably not till like I would compete in all those. I would do big air, moguls, and half pipe, and then probably around 8th grade is when I more started to just focus on moguls.
Okay. And what was the driving force kind of behind that?
For one thing, I really liked it because it kind of combined like a lot of the aspects of the sport into one. Like you had to skiing, you had to ski fast, you had to be good at jumping, so it was kind of interesting that way. And then I think I also had found I actually found success in big mountain or in big air too, but probably more success in moguls, so that probably had a part of it. And then I remember actually yeah, for sure. And then we had a sit down one time with my parents and Marty Alden, who I mentioned earlier, and the head coach at the time, Guy Cantrell, who was a French guy who actually represented France in World Championships, like in I think the 80s. And they were just like pretty much, if you want to go somewhere in skiing, you probably are gonna have to pick one, and they kind of like helped me make that choice of just sticking to moguls.
Gotcha. Now, how soon after that did you start skiing like juniors and more kind of nationally and stick away from regionals?
Yeah, my whole path was pretty delayed. So juniors probably, I would think like sophomore year-ish of high school, something like that would be my guess. And then my first nationals, I think I skied in my senior year of high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right, because I remember the first time we met was it was definitely like juniors. I remember with Dougie Horn. It was
yeah. So yeah, you probably
somewhere in there, like 2007, 2008.
2007, 2008. That sounds right. The first Waterville year, I think, was my first junior.
Okay, first Waterville.
Actually, no. Wait, was Steamboat before or after Waterville?
Steamboat was before and after.
Oh, I maybe went to the last Steamboat one before I moved to Waterville. That was probably my first.
Okay, gotcha. Now, when did you decide to make the move out west? Because eventually you kind of made a decision to start training out in Park City.
Yeah, so the timeline behind that was I graduated from Gould Academy in 2010, and then the next 2 seasons, I joined Glenn Eddy, who's like kind of probably the most influential coach I've worked with over the years, and we kind of had like a smaller team based out of Maine, but we would travel all the time. So it was like myself and Allison DeGravio, and then we'd have a couple random like international athletes. Like we'd have Life, who was skiing for Germany, Darius, who was representing Iran, Wu Cho, who was representing Korea, South African Brad was in the mix. So we had like really
a wide variety.
Yeah, for a couple of years. And then after I think 2 years of that, then Glenn and myself both moved out west and joined the Park City team. So he joined as a coach and I joined as an athlete. And that was in 2012, 2013 season.
So before you were talking a little bit just kind of about lagging behind. and
Hmm.
what was being a little bit behind other people. Now, what was kind of your driving force and just kind of closing the gap there? Or why did you feel you were lagging behind?
So I didn't realize that, like in high school, I didn't really realize I was behind. I would say, like I was doing regional events and still doing pretty well, but never like broke onto like those national or NORAM events really. And so I kind of thought I was doing, kind of thought I was hot shit back then, winning regional events and stuff. But we weren't like the program wasn't really that intense then. Like it was just a bunch of friends. We would obviously ski like on the weekdays and travel to regionals on the weekends, but we weren't like it's not like we were traveling to Australia in the summertime to train. Like we would maybe water ramp for like a week or two at Lake Placid, and we would maybe go to Whistler for a week. But that was about the extent of our like summer training program. So um, I guess yeah, just like the level of intensity wasn't really there. So when I graduated and joined Glenn's program, that's when like this whole other world of like intensity and training and like everything just opened up. I was like, whoa, there's way more than I thought here, and also I'm way farther behind than everybody else. But for me, that was like, I think that was almost one of the best things to happen. Well, yeah, probably one of the best things to happen to me because when I graduated high school, it was like it just ramped up and there was a lot more to learn. Where I think a lot of kids my age had already experienced all that stuff, and so maybe they were kind of starting to plateau right when I was starting to like peak or ramp up.
And the ramp up was starting.
Yeah.
So, what was that next step like? Because you feel like you're a little bit behind, you're starting to get a little bit more drive. What was kind of your main focuses to kind of get you further ahead? Like, what were you thinking about? What was your kind of game planning, thought processes of getting yourself to where you wanted to go?
Yeah, I think like it was tough because I had to work on everything. But I was always like more natural jumper for sure. So I'd say like the first year with Glenn, like I definitely spent a ton of time working on my jumps and kind of like relearning how to do them. But I was able to like get those to a really high level really quickly. And then so as soon as my jumping kind of achieved that level where it was like on par with some of the best guys who I was competing against, then the
Mhm.
focus definitely shifted to learning how to turn, like turn technique. And that was pretty much like an ongoing battle for the rest of my career. Like I always had to work more on turn technique than jumping.
Sounds like
But I
you
think
enjoyed the
like
jumping.
I definitely enjoyed the jumping, yeah. But beyond like just like the pure technical stuff, I think like Glenn helped me lay down a really solid foundation of not like focusing on. We weren't necessarily focusing on results. We were more focusing on like the run and laying down my best possible run. And so like especially in my early years, I would always do like my highest degree of difficulty jumps every single competition run, no matter what, just because we're kind of like laying that foundation, like that pattern of being able to ski at that like highest, like the peak level of your ability. And so that paid off big time towards the end of my career because I was
You're
never
making that
worried
the new
about
normal.
yeah, I was never worried about like the big like trying to throw a big trick or trying to ski like as fast as I could because I had done that forever. Like that's
Yeah.
all we did.
So when would you say the first kind of big breakthrough kind of happened?
Um, like result wise is easier I think to gauge than when like technical breakthroughs happen, but
Sure, yeah,
result
go.
wise,
Results are good.
yeah,
What it's
result
all
wise,
about.
I remember I won junior nationals. I guess the second time it was in Steamboat in duels, and that was like probably like the first big national based result I won. I beat
Hmm.
Nick King in duels. That was crazy because he was always fast. And then and then it kind of just slowly ramped up from there. So like the next year, again at Steamboat, I won or I can't remember if it was first or second overall, but at selections I think I got third the first day, second the second day, and won the last day. And that qualified me for some World Cup starts. So that kind of ramped up fast. And that was crazy because I went from like not qualifying for the full NORAM tour the year before that to qualifying for the World Cup for a couple World Cups the next year. So yeah, that was like that. Those were the years when it really started to find some success. That was probably like 2011, 12, 13 years like that.
Okay. What was that? Was probably like copper or something. Is that wrong?
Copper was the second selections I won. So the first one was Steamboat, the
Okay.
second one was Copper the next year, and then I actually won the next one in Winter Park the following year.
Yeah. No need for NORAMs when you can just go right up to the It's a big show, right?
Yeah, I never won
Great.
on Orient. I got second one time. That was it.
So making that transition, what's the first experience like when you're up in the gate at a World Cup?
Yeah,
How much does that change? How much does that differentiate? Because I know skiing at regional level, it's definitely not nearly as intense. You got kids
Mhm.
of all ages trying to get better. Some are just there to have fun. Some are not there to take it. It's kind of just a wish wash of different athletes competing. Where at a World Cup, I mean, that's the best of the best.
Yeah, I don't know why, but I was a better World Cup skier than a NORAM skier and maybe even a regional skier. I think just because that intensity, like once I got a taste of the World Cup and that intensity level, it was almost hard for me to go back to the lower levels and get as excited. I don't know. So
Yeah.
yeah, I really liked that. I like vaguely remember my first World Cup. I sometimes have foggy memory of things like that, but I remember just being in Lake Placid in the lodge, like when everybody got there in the morning and seeing all like Bilodeau and Mick warming up, and just like that was a pretty surreal experience for sure.
Yeah, did the whole because it was Placid, so the whole family they made the trek. I'm assuming.
Oh, for
Quite the
sure.
contingent there.
Yep, for sure. But like the training days, not so much. So that was like a little more, just Glenn and I probably.
Nice. So then after that, when's you fully qualified for the ski team? Not just getting some World Cup starts. What year was that? Was 2014? I want to say.
Yeah. So yeah, 2013, 2014 season.
Okay. Gotcha.
So I qualified off the points list in the spring of 2013.
Gotcha. That's right. That was at Heavenly when I kept you waiting in the parking lot for like 4 hours after drug testing.
Yep, that's when you had the longest drug test of all time.
Longest drug test of all time. Well, they didn't tell you beforehand. That drug testing process is a little bit interesting sometimes. They got to do it before and then after, right?
But you passed.
Guys on the podium. If I had known, I would have just not gone to the bathroom then. But
right.
So then after that first experience being with the ski team, how much does that change your life?
That was kind of a slow transition for me too, actually, because I was fortunate enough to have Glenn and Chris Marchetti, the Park City coach. Those guys had a couple different World Cup athletes, and so I was able that first year to kind of travel and train with the Park City crew and kind of like slowly blend into the ski team. So it wasn't like an immediate shock, which I've definitely seen like some athletes have a hard time with that adjustment because it is a big adjustment. You're just finding like success. You made a huge career achievement, and then like all of a sudden the whole structure that you've been used to is gone. So that's kind of a tricky one, I think, for people to deal with, like that transition to totally new coaches. But yeah, I was lucky. I was able to do it slowly, so it worked out pretty well for me. Actually, not a lot changed, I wouldn't say.
Right. So when you go through, how much like when you're starting to go with the ski team now, what are the goals? What are the steps that you're kind of striving for? I mean, obviously everyone in mogul skiing wants to ski at the Olympics and stuff like that, but what's kind of the structure that you set forth for yourself so you have the opportunity to be successful?
Yeah, obviously, yeah, like you said, the long goals, the Olympics for sure. And then before, like, other than that, it's pretty much all about World Cup results. And so you're just trying to ski as well as you can on World Cup. So I think, like, when I was first on the team, it was about making, just trying to break into that World Cup final. And then once that started to happen, then it was about getting into the super final. And then from there, about getting onto the podium. So there's kind of a nice, like, progression goal-wise where you can see yourself getting on that path.
Now, how much did your structuring for like setting goals and stuff like that kind of change as you kind of grew as an athlete?
I don't know. Like, actually, the nice thing about the ski team was well, maybe it's nice, maybe it's not, but it wasn't as much structured that like I had to do myself. It was more like you had people there helping you. So like the strength program was totally written out for you, and you had your strength coach. So like the guesswork was taken out of it there. Obviously the coaching staff would have like the whole summer training program laid out, so as long as you showed up, like that was pretty dialed. And so I guess it was like the day-to-day structure part of it was easier because yeah, you just trust the program. But where you'd have to make sure you were on top of it was just making sure that you showed up every day training like as hard as you could and wanting to get something out of it. And my last years on the ski team, I started working with a sports psychologist named Craig Manning, and he like really helped me dial in my like day-to-day goals and like journaling, that kind of stuff. That made a huge difference. I wish I had that when I first got on the team.
Gotcha. Now he was what? Fearless Mind?
Yeah, Craig was the Fearless Mind stuff. I actually haven't connected with him for a while. Last I knew, he was like doing a bunch of stuff with multiple teams, like bigger sports teams. I'm not sure what he's doing now, but I'm sure the Fearless Mind is something you can still. He's got a book. I think you can still look up his website probably too.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. So, 2015 is a pretty good year for you. You come through. What? That was a national champion that year. You get to ski in your first world championships.
Yeah, yeah. The year, like the competitive year before nationals, didn't. I mean, I did get to ski at World Champs, which is a super cool experience. Other than that, I didn't have like a ton of successful results. They're decent, I think, but and then I pulled it out at the end there and won national. So that was like a cool way to like kind of ramp that year back up to end on a high note
and get you ready for the big march towards 2018, right? And you were close for 2014, almost making the Olympics.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say exactly how it would have shaken out. I think we only sent 2 guys. We sent Brad, Wilson, and Pat in that year. And depending on how like the criteria would have worked out, I maybe would have been the next guy in line. But it's obviously those things are hard to quantify.
Yeah, I just remember at the bottom of where we were skiing, I think at Deer Valley, and you got a call to go to like St. Combs, ski like one of the World Cups there, and it was like a less than a 24-hour time period of like flying to show up to train, and then you skied really well, right? You ended up taking like 4th or something.
Yeah, those were a lot of times when I had like weird situations going into an event, or like I trained really poorly, or like was injured. Those would be like some of my best events. So yeah, that scenario was I didn't qualify for St. Combs, but then at the last second somebody got hurt and wasn't going to ski, and I was in the gate of the Deer Valley Noriam to get ready for a 4 run, and Marchetti called up on the radio and was like, "Hey, is Murphy in the gate?" And they were like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Get him out of there. He's flying to St. Combs." So we like rushed out, went to his house, booked a flight, and I think I landed or I got to the hotel in Quebec like at 3 or 4 a.m. and then competed the next day. So I had like 2 or 3 training runs in the course, and then ended up getting 4th. That was cool.
That's pretty sweet. That's epic. So then also kind of while you're pursuing this elite career in mogul skiing, you're also kind of doing a little bit of filming on the side, right? Kind of keep yourself nice and fresh.
Yeah, that was like became like a big part of my skiing, just for fun, was going up to Alaska. So I got to do that the first time in 2011-12 season probably. Yeah. Yeah, 2011, 2012. It was right after I got back from junior nationals, and this crew from Maine, it was like a local energy drink startup. They were like a drink sponsor of this event called Tailgate Alaska, which happens in Valdez, and invited me to go. And so like I ordered my first pair of powder skis that day and like went up there with like zero idea what we were doing. And we were way over our heads, like trying to snowmobile into these crazy like big mountain zones, not even knowing how to snowmobile. But that left like a super lasting impression on me. And so yeah, I've gone to Alaska, I think 7 or 8 years since, and brought a bunch of teammates. Like Hunter Bailey is one of my teammates in the ski team. He's been up a bunch, and that's been like the thing I look forward to at the end of every year, to kind of like get a re-up on the passion for skiing and just kind of keep it fun again.
Now, how many days will you usually go when you do a trip like that?
It was about like roughly like 2 weeks to a month, I would say. At first we would like fly up.
Just a bunch of dudes in a van, huh?
Yeah, we would rent an RV and then like rent or like buy a snowmobile and leave it on our way out. And then as we got a little more dialed, and we would start driving up there, trailering up all these snowmobiles and stuff. Some crazy times, crazy stories from that, but really fun.
how many people would usually go on the trip with you? Would it just be a couple guys, or would you guys usually have like a whole? Would you bring a whole RV crew up there to with everyone
Yeah,
else?
it would vary. Like one year, the first year I did it on my own, it was just Hunter and I, which was pretty funny in hindsight, just us trying to figure it out. And then it went to being like there were four of us plus like a whole crew from Columbia Sportswear came in to like film a little bit. And so that would probably be a crew of like 8 or 9. And then we had another year where it was us and then a whole another RV of guys from Colorado came. So it would kind of vary depending on the year.
Okay. And how much did you say, or would you say that you learned from that to kind of transfer over to some like what kind of perspective did that give you the rest
Mm.
of your skiing
The
or life?
first perspective is like no mogul course will ever seem scary after you ski in Alaska for sure. Ever. Like it's just so much such a different thing up there. But I think the biggest one was in like sport, you'll always hear about people getting into like flow state or like that point where like you're just on autopilot and your brain just shuts off and your body's just doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
And I never really found that in competition.
Hmm.
But as soon as I started to get into like some of those really spicy hikes in Alaska, like where you're hiking up to your line and it's like cliffs on both sides and huge consequence, I like automatically found myself slipping into that mode where like it was my brain was just on autopilot. And even though I was like super gripped in like this scary situation, my body just did everything. I didn't even really have to think about it. And so I think that once I felt that a couple times in Alaska, then I was starting able to bring it back more into like the competition gate into in some of like my toward the end of my competition career.
Would you say that it helped?
Yeah, for sure. I think it definitely helped. Like just being able to really trust your skiing, because in Alaska you can't ski some like you're skiing it once for the first time. You can't see anything when you're at the top because it like everything rolls over. So like you can see your ski tips and then you can see like the bottom of the slope like thousands of feet below. And so that feeling of like nerves is definitely similar to the competition one. Like a lot of times in the competition, you can only see the top area, you can't see the rest of the course, and it can be like pretty nerve wracking. But
Hmm.
after being in Alaska, like that feeling was so familiar and so much more heightened in Alaska that when it was in competition, it was like mellow.
Now, where can because you got a few of those videos are up on YouTube, or where can people go to check those out?
Yeah, most of them are on my Vimeo page. So if you go to Vimeo and then search Troy Murphy like under users, you'll find my profile and they're all on there.
Nice. So back, you kind of get done with that every spring after the season's over. Then you're gearing up. And when do you kind of start thinking about 2018? Is it always in the back of your mind, or is it one of those things where you're just kind of taking it year to year, and ultimately that's where you want to get? But
I think both. Like it's so like like that thought will always pop into your head, especially after being so close in 2014. Like that thought would always pop into your head. But for the most part, it was like just taking it day by day, training camp by training camp, and then um, yeah. And I think like subconsciously those big goals are always there, but I think it almost helps if you can kind of block them out and more focus on like the controllables in the moment.
okay, gotcha. So you move in, and let's see, 2016, 2017, you kind of start to grow a little bit more. You're more of a veteran of that World Cup circuit.
Mm-hmm.
And what, 2017, best year. You finished sixth overall, right? Yeah, sixth
Yeah, yeah,
overall.
sixth in the world. I had like made a bunch of super finals and was skiing really consistent. Yeah, that was definitely one of my best, if not my best year consistency wise. It was really good.
What would you say was probably the biggest part to help with that?
I think that was the year when I started to work with Craig Manning, the Fearless Nine sports like we talked about earlier. I
Hmm.
think that was probably the biggest difference because other than that, not much changed. The year before was my worst year. I had a bunch of injuries. And so then to be able to like just block all that stuff out and like have a really dialed journaling system and a really dialed way of like processing what you're doing well and what you need to work on, just simple things like that made a huge difference in that year.
Now, what were the changes like you made in your journaling system? Like, how did that create the success for you?
Before my journaling would be like really haphazard. It was like maybe I would do it some days, maybe I would take a month off from doing it or whatever, and I didn't have like much structure. But Craig had like a really dialed way of keeping your journal points like very well. First of all, he had like a really good structure. So you would like first wrote what your plan was, like what you were trying to achieve. You'd write your goal for the day, the 3 things you were going to do to achieve the goal, and then at the end of the day, you would go back and write what you did well and what you wanted to work on. And then he made a very strong emphasis on having those things be like really concise, like 2 words at the most, and really actionable. So not conceptual ideas, but things that you could actually like do with your body. So if it was like you needed to work on your takeoff, instead of saying like work on takeoff, you would say like arms up or something like that, where it was like actionable things.
Mm-hmm.
And so by doing those 2 things, making things very specific and then putting a lot of emphasis on what you're doing well, then you're always like kind of reinforcing this positive mindset and only focusing on one thing that you need to work on.
Gotcha. It sounds like it's a pretty good system.
Yeah, it was awesome. Made such a huge impact for sure.
So now take me into, you come off your best season ever, 6th place, and now you're coming into the Olympic year. So what's that prep like?
I mean, we pretty much did all the same like camp. I think we did all the same camps for the most part. Everything was kind of the same. It was just maybe like a little bit more intensity, like a little more on the line. But again, like subconsciously, that was more in the subconscious. I wasn't really focusing on that. I was just trying to control my controllables and just get as most as I could out of each day. So it wasn't like,
So it's more on the day-to-day level, like when you're
right.
going out to the water ramps, when you're going out, you kind of have the specific things you're working on, whether it's your takeoff on your double full or it's technique wise, something getting a little more backside pressure or working on your hands somewhere, and
Right.
then you're kind of just figuring out
Yeah.
the day.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say like that much changed. Maybe it was like a little more motivated to work hard, maybe, but that was never really my problem. I would kind of like work as hard as I, thought I had the option to. So yeah, it's more just again focusing on those the technical skills and just getting better.
How did the qualification process go that season?
I never was a guy who like actually paid attention to criteria, like how you actually would make it. I just knew that if I executed as well as I could, then things would come together. It's obviously all based off of World Cup results, and it's all the qualifying is done in the year before the Olympics, like in that season. So it's a very short window of time to make it happen. And I was at our second World Cup of that year in China. I got my first podium. I got third in China, and that pretty much was enough to qualify me. So it was cool that happened. Like the timing worked out, and it kind of took a little bit of pressure off it in the build up to the Olympics.
What was the experience like first podium? Where that was in China?
Yeah, I was in China. That was super cool. I'd been like so close to the podium for so many years that it was awesome to finally like get on there. One actually cool thing tying back into Alaska that was cool about that event was there was like a helicopter flying around at that event. I can't remember why, but right before my super final run, like the last run of that event, the helicopter was like right above the course. And so I felt like I was at the top of like a big Alaska line with like the heli flying around. So that was like pretty cool. Another tie back into that.
That's pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm.
What is it like when you go over and you're competing in China?
I had a great China experience. I know like other teammates have had horrible ones. The place we went, Taiwu, is like a new resort, and so like it almost feels like you're in the Vale of China. Like all the hotels are nice, the food is pretty good. But before that, they were going to this other place in China that sounded a lot more rugged. But for me it was good. Like the Moga course is pretty sweet. It was kind of firm. Like it was always really cold and not much natural snow, so it was really really firm. But it was great.
How far is like how bad's the travel for that? Where do you fly into?
Yeah, that one was gnarly because we were in Ruka right before that, and we were flying from Ruka around the world to China. We had like a 2-day break maybe at home, and then our flight coming from Ruka, which is in Finland, so the flight from Finland home got delayed. We like sat on the plane on the runway for like 6 hours, and then had a deplane. The flight got canceled. Got on a flight to the U.S. the next day. I think I had like less than 12 hours at home, and then we flew to
Jeez.
China. Yeah. Yeah, that Olympic year, for some reason, like every single trip we had, something got messed up other than the Olympic flight.
Is that one of the hardest things like during the season? Is just being able to deal with all the travel and make sure your body's able to stay fresh when you're just constantly going to new places and you're stuck in an airport for 12
I
hours?
think it depends on the person. I never had like that much trouble with it. I'm like definitely like a roll with the punches type of guy, and yeah, I didn't never. I mean, traveling all the time wasn't the most fun thing, but like for me, it was almost like you were jet lagged and so tired, and it would just compound enough that you would just sleep whenever you could, and it didn't really matter that much. I felt.
So after China, you get a few more events after that before the Olympics, or how does that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
What did we have? We had Deer. We definitely had Deer Valley. We had Calgary, Tremblant. I think that was it.
when do you get the word that you're going?
Right after the last World Cup before the Olympics. So Tremblant was the last World Cup. I think it was like 2 weeks before, something like that. And after that event, we kind of got like we had a team meeting, and our coach Matt Canosa like kind of gave us like the unofficial rundown of what things were looking like. And then we knew it was like I knew it was looking pretty good, and then flew home. And then the next day after I got home, I think we got like the official word that the team was officially announced.
Now, what is that process? Because there are tons and tons of people that will never get that experience. And what is that like to be able to share? You get that call. It's a pretty big call from Ganoza to let you know you've been selected. And then what's the kind of whirlwind of how long do you have before you have to go? A week?
Yeah, like a week to 10 days ish, I think.
So short.
Very short, yeah. But yeah, that was like one of the coolest times of my life for sure, because like you just found out that you like achieved like your lifelong goal pretty much, and then the whole team came into Deer Valley to train like on a mogul course that they built just for us to train on. It was like perfect, really sick mogul course. We got to go to the U.S. ski team headquarters and get all of our like Olympic gear and start training in our new gear. There were like press releases and autograph signs, just like everything, all that cool stuff that associated with like, you feel like you're almost like a bigger, like one of those more professional sport athletes where like all that kind of crazy media attention and everything's like pampered and tailored to you, that kind of stuff. It was cool.
So where do you fly out from Salt Lake? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we flew from Salt Lake to Seoul, and we had like probably 2 or 3 days in Seoul for like processing, which is where you get all your other, they go through like your like just briefings and stuff like that, and then you get all your other Team USA opening ceremony gear and things like that. And then after a couple of days in Seoul, then we went to Pyeongchang, and we had a bunch of days there too. Like we had probably 4 days of training before we competed, and there's just like a lot more time built in than a normal World Cup.
So when was your event kind of during the Olympics? Was it in the first few days, or was it okay?
Yeah, so our qualifying and finals happened in 2 separate days, and we actually qualified before opening ceremony. So like I guess before the games officially started. And then
you did qualifying, and then did you go to the opening ceremonies, or were you guys?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that night. Because then we went to the opening ceremonies that night, and then the next day we had off, and the women competed, and then we competed 2 days after that. So I guess our actual comp was 2 days into the games.
That's got to be hard. Like you go over there early, and then it's like the ceremonies, that stuff hasn't even begun yet. You're already doing like your Olympic qualifying run and all that stuff, and then you have to go to the opening ceremony.
Yeah, it was tough. Like the tougher part for me was just like that our whole format that we're always used to changed. Like we're used to having 2 training days, and then you compete, and it's all on one day. Like you go qualifying, final, super final, somebody's the winner, all in the matter of one day. There, like the training days weren't too bad. It was kind of nice. You had like a lot of time to figure out the course. You didn't like you had to like really grind or anything. Like you could take it slow and make sure your body felt good. and then qualifying was fine. Like I did really well. I actually qualified in fourth, and then going to opening ceremonies that night was probably like one of the best days of my life because I skied really well in my first Olympic run, then got to go to opening ceremonies. But the tough part was then already having some success in the event, but then having a whole day off to just like chill and try not to think about it, just try to like relax and then compete the next day. For me, that was a tough transition.
How hard is that to not think about where you're sitting and your place?
Hard. Like, yeah, consciously you try your best to just relax and not think about it, but subconsciously, like that's so, yeah, very hard to shut out of your mind for sure.
So, what do you think of the opening ceremonies? How was that experience? Because most people, they get that kind of TV visual. They have the commentary kind of going and everything else. Where you guys get to walk in the stadium, look around. It's got to be quite the feeling.
Yeah, that was super cool. The interesting thing about it is like you miss half of it because we're like in this tent with all the countries, and the US is obviously pretty far down the alphabet, so we were just waiting inside to march. So, but that was cool because you were like in this big tent with all the countries, and you could see like some of the bigger name people in the tent. Like you'd recognize people in there, and people were like trading, country pins, which is obviously a big Olympic thing. And then, yeah, when we finally did start marching, it was super cool. It was freezing that night, and it was really windy, and it was an open-air stadium, so I feel bad for the people that were just chilling, watching the whole thing. But one thing that was interesting is, like, all the seats were there, but then they had, like, a light, like, right above everybody's head that was part of the show. Like, the lights would change colors, and the whole stadium would, like, kind of be a part of the show. But when we walked in, because the light was above everyone, you couldn't tell that people were sitting under the lights, so we, like, thought it was totally empty, which is pretty funny.
Huh.
But still super cool. Yeah, to march with that team around the whole thing and then go up to your seats. It was definitely surreal.
That's awesome. So then take me through, you have a couple days to sit and think about it, and then you get to the finals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so yeah, we had the one day off and then went to the finals the next day. I was feeling great. Like I pretty much felt the same as I did on that qualifying day. Wasn't too nervous like in the starting gate or anything, just pretty much normal. Maybe like a little more heightened, but that was to be expected and kind of good. Like I wouldn't want to be totally just like flatlined up there. I wanted to be excited. And yeah, the whole like upper part of my run was good. Landed my double full well, skied the middle section pretty well, and then had like a tiny mistake on my bottom air, which was not very characteristic of me. But at that stage, like one mistake is enough to keep you out of the game.
Gotcha. Now, did you talk to Craig beforehand?
Sorry, Siri just yelled at me. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Did you get to talk to Craig Manning before? Were you kind of talking with him as you were going through those stages, those days off kind of leading up to that?
A little bit. Our thing was always like trying to not make it so like I was relying on him as like a crutch. Like I definitely wanted to still be independent. And this is his thing too. Like you still want to be independent so that if you weren't able to talk to him, it's not like your whole thing was ruined. So
okay.
Pretty much our routine would be like right before a competition, I would just message him like the 3 things I was going to work on, and he would just say, yeah, it looks good, or hey, maybe shorten this one thing up, make it more actionable. So that was really it. Like it wasn't too in depth or anything, which I think is a good thing. I think, yeah, you can definitely like, if you don't get the long talk with your sports site, you get all freaked out. Like we didn't want to have that situation.
Sure. So now you go through, you get your Olympic experience in, and after that's kind of done, you had a couple mistakes, didn't quite get the result that you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
What feelings are you left with?
Definitely bummed for sure. Like that was an opportunity that comes around once in 4 years, and I had skied so well on the qualifying day. Like I was really like excited and fired up to like do well, and so that one mistake was definitely a bummer. But once that like initial kind of sting of not doing well went away, it was still cool. It's still a super cool experience to have made it that far and have been a part of Team USA. And then the kind of nice thing was we were early in the game, so we like got to go and check out a bunch of other events and things like that. So at first, definitely a bummer, but if you learn anything in this sport, it's like how to handle those disappointments, which there are a ton of. So kind of just another one of those disappointments.
Now, did you, obviously family, girlfriend, all that stuff was over there.
Hmm.
And did they stick around the whole time? Like, were they allowed to go to the events with you, or how'd that work?
No, they stayed a couple days after. Trying to think what I think just a day or two after my event, really. So I got to spend some time with my parents the night after the event, and then Shelby, my fiance, and I got to go to Seoul and hang out for a couple days there. So that was pretty cool. It was my dad's first time out of North America, which is crazy, and I think my mom's only second time. So they actually came to Seoul.
How much of a culture shock was that?
I mean, they loved it. My mom was like in her element. It was awesome. So that was one of the coolest parts. That was like getting to be there with them and like share that experience with them because they obviously sacrificed a ton to get me there.
Awesome. That's good that they were able to be there. So after you go through, you take full advantage of everything over there because what they got the McDonald's, which is like all you can eat. You can get as much as you eat, right? Like what's with the sponsorships there? It's pretty nice in the Olympic Village, right?
Yeah, there was two Olympic villages. There's like the mountain cluster and the coastal cluster, which is where like the skating and yeah, I guess mainly just skating events were down there. So that's where the McDonald's was. So we took a trip down there and went to the McDonald's, and they had like along the beach, they had a bunch of like these really cool wooden, like almost like Burning Man type structures that we like checked out. And I guess they would burn one of those each night of the games, which we didn't stay for.
Really?
That. Yeah, that was cool. We went to a short track speed skating event, which like super cool. I didn't expect that to be as entertaining as it was. That was probably the most fun thing I went to. We went to a USA Canada women's hockey game. That was awesome. Yeah, so just checked out a bunch of different events, and then Casey Andringa, a teammate, and I actually bounced out of the Olympics early and went to Japan to ski powder for like the last week before our next World Cup. So that was super cool. Like the highlight of the trip was almost going to Japan and skiing powder.
I expect nothing less. That's pretty sweet. So, what's the feeling like getting back to? You still have a season to finish.
Yeah,
like, what is that like after you have this big build up and there's, you have the big break too. How is it trying to refocus and get back ready for the rest to finish out the season?
That was pretty challenging for me anyway, because I just gone to Japan, Casey and I, and we ski powder for like every day for like a week, and it was like unreal conditions, so much fun. And so to like get back into the grind of like a regular season mogul comp was challenging for me.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. The cool part about it was like you still got to see all your friends, like international friends from the Olympics and people who didn't make it. Like it was cool to have that World Cup gang back together.
Yeah.
But yeah, the competing part was challenging for sure.
And so when do you start, because you ended up retiring after that year, when do those thoughts start to happen?
Pretty much immediately after the games. Like I didn't think about it at all before then, which I'm super grateful for. And then right after the games, it was like, I felt like I had gotten a lot out of the sport. Like most of the lessons I was going to learn, I had gotten it. And so I started to think about it right after the games. And then once we got to Japan and started skiing powder every day, I was like, yeah, I'm definitely done competing. Like I just want to do this. So yeah, that trip to Japan was definitely like solidified the idea that I wanted to ski more powder and not because the thing about mogul skiing was I loved it and I loved the training part of it, but at a certain point I felt like I was losing out on a lot of skiing for feet, like for fun, like skiing for me type stuff. So that was like kind of like the final time where I knew I wanted to do something different.
Put a stamp, put a button on it, put a bow on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Now you talk about some of the lessons you kind of gained, all the lessons that you could, or at least that you thought you could at that point. What were like some of those biggest lessons and takeaways that you could use for the rest of your life, or that would pertain to not just stuff on the hill, but every day?
Yeah, I feel like pretty much all of them were things that I could apply to everyday life. And I would almost say like everything I've come to learn this far has been as a result of skiing, like whether it's work ethic or learning how to be coached, like learning how to be coachable, to take feedback and use it as positive rather than a negative. I'm trying to think of like some of the big ones, but it's hard because I feel like everything I learned was a big lesson, and everything I learned was the result of skiing. I don't know if that makes sense, but
No, it makes sense.
I think probably the biggest one is just learning about yourself and like where you perform well and where your strengths and weaknesses are and how you can kind of manage those as you go through life to make sure you're, always on that like peak performing path.
Now, so you finished out that season, last event, you skied U.S. Nationals. Did everyone know that you were going to be done, or did you kind of just?
Yeah, at least like
Yeah.
everyone on the World Cup, all the coaches and all the athletes on the World Cup knew, and then yeah, people obviously like the rest of the kind of U.S. skiing community probably found out there.
God, yeah, I think that's where I found out there.
Mm-hmm.
Or yeah, right around, yeah, somewhere in there. Now, what were your thoughts for next steps? Did you just want to go into pro skiing and do kind of filming and backcountry and stuff like that because you had such a passion for it, or was it got to go back, get some schooling done?
Yeah, both. I knew that for sure. I like wanted to do school and like start ramping up for like a real career, like a real job type of thing. Because I definitely didn't want to be like a ski bum forever. And I think it's easy to get trapped like doing just coaching for a while or trying to like be that pro ski videographer. But I think like all that stuff is there's like a definite endpoint. And so I didn't want to be like stuck like just putting all his eggs in one basket. But I also knew I wanted to do at least one winter where I was just traveling, skiing backcountry and doing that kind of stuff for fun. So that was the plan for that next year. I did school all summer and fall. And then as soon as fall break started, I took the whole spring semester off and traveled with one of my childhood buddies, Chris Lee from Maine. And we just he had a trailer and we had our snowmobiles and we just like cruised around all in North America, just skiing backcountry. It was super fun.
What were some of the best spots?
Alaska was obviously like a highlight, and then last year Montana, we had really good conditions in Montana. We were in just north of Missoula, and then we were also in Cook City, and those were probably the two best trips.
You didn't you didn't go backcountry Killington or Sugarloaf or anything like that?
I did actually I went home to Maine and brought my pow surfboard and did some pow surfing in the woods, but yeah, it wasn't a highlight. I wouldn't say.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you're kind of back finishing up school, stuff like that, and then you started to transition. You do a little bit of coaching as well on the side, right?
Yeah, coaching is something I've kind of always done, or at least since like probably 2012. I would coach in the summers for Glenna Head Ski Camp, Planet Ski International in Whistler. So I coached at that camp for like a month every year, and then I ended up coaching a little bit for like the Park City team at the water ramps in the summer times, a little bit for Telluride at the water ramps, and then this year took on the role as the head coach of the Park City team with Jeff Yingling, who was the guy who like first got me into the sport. He was the director, and I was the head coach. So that's been a pretty cool experience, kind of bringing it all full circle.
What is the different dynamic now that you're kind of on the other side and you're actually trying to get people to listen to you?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you definitely realize, or I definitely realize, I think like there's a lot of ego in the coaching world, and I knew I didn't want to be like one of those guys. And so it's all about just like giving the athletes every opportunity you can to help them, but you can't think that you're like the make or break person for them. So I definitely realized that like the athletes I was coaching, they were doing it all themselves, and I was just there to like offer a little bit of feedback or try to get them excited or try to like point out one little thing they could do to get better. But I think it's important to like let them kind of figure it out for their own a little bit. Like you can't be like the only motivating factor for them. Like if they want to do it, they're going to do it. If they don't want to do it, they're not going to do it, type of thing. So you're just there kind of like as a guide, but they have to figure it out for themselves. And that's important. Like I wouldn't want to be the one that's like totally dictating their career. Like they have to like learn those lessons for sure.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, definitely that helps with their own transition, right? And trying to figure out what they want to accomplish.
Totally. Yeah, and it's just more meaningful, like when they had like some say in the matter, like they were the ones making the decisions and it pays off and it's awesome. And if they were the ones making some decisions and they didn't pay off, then they'll learn from it.
Did you feel that it was easier to help game plan for them and allow them to reach what they wanted to having all the experience and all the knowledge of all the stuff that you've kind of been through? Do you feel like that made life pretty easy for them, or did it make it more difficult because you knew exactly what steps it took for you and how it worked, and it's harder to make that transition for them?
I think a little bit of both. Like in some situations, my my experience and like expectations would be maybe higher, and I would like find myself having to think back to like when I was in high school, what was I doing? And the answer is like not much. So it was like having to like bring it back to reality a little bit. Like these are kids, they're in high school. Like you gotta like realize what stage of life they're in.
Yeah,
But then like yeah, from like a tactical standpoint, like trying to figure out what they're supposed to do on the hill or like what they could work on, like that was super easy. I've been doing that for my whole life, so it's like a little bit of a balance between like yeah, managing expectations, but then like also like giving them the appropriate amount of like intensity and programming and stuff like that.
gotcha. So plans kind of moving forward, you're going to continue doing a little bit of coaching, or what are the next steps?
Yeah, I'm not. That's kind of like up in the air. I gotta definitely like my main focus is finishing up school and finishing strong. So got to make sure that that's happening, and then so it'll kind of be based around that. And obviously, right now these are kind of crazy times. We're in this whole coronavirus situation, so
Yeah, this was supposed to take place in person, but
yeah, right.
we got to kind of move on the fly and make it work this way. The next one will be in person, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I'd say right now it's just kind of up in the air. Like who knows what's going to happen with this whole climate, but yeah, make sure I finish up school and then try to get some experience in a more real career and kind of figure out things from there.
Now you have another personality that has kind of become much bigger than you.
That's true.
Your boy Donnie, right?
Yeah, Donnie Pelletier is that Mainer from Bethel who kind of steals all my thunder.
Now, how did that start?
Super organically. Shelby and I were just skiing at Park City on closing day, right after that Olympic year, I think. Yeah, and it was like clown day, so everybody dresses up as whatever and goes skiing. It's like a kind of big party at the end of the year on the hill. And we both dressed up as Mainers, and I had her film like just a couple clips of me like skiing kind of like a goon, and it blew up. It got like 1 million post reach on Facebook, and so yeah, it just kind of took on a life of its own from there.
So he now you're making a bunch of videos as him, right? You kind of keeping the myth alive, keeping Donnie going.
I've definitely been slacking a little bit this winter. It's been so busy, but yeah, the goal is to keep Donnie going, find new experiences for him to get into, and keep people laughing, keep it fun.
So have you kind of curtailing on that? Have you been able to go back and kind of give back to the community back home in Bethel and Gould and stuff like that? Because you go back to sure. Sandy River, right? Pretty fair amount.
Yeah, I go back quite a bit. And yeah, I definitely like to give back as much as I can back there, whether it's like coaching some of those athletes or I've been running fundraisers there for like pretty much the whole later part of my career to try to make money for it. And now that I don't need that money, we're still trying to keep those fundraisers going and kick that money back to like the local ski club for athletes to use as they kind of come up on their journey.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, it's mostly things like that. Like the fundraiser is a big one. Working with athletes when I get the chance is a big one.
How often is that? Do you do your fundraiser?
It's usually every October.
Every
October, yeah.
And so does that funding every year just go back to the ski team, or do you kind of pick a different thing in the community to donate it towards?
So far, it's gone back to that local ski club, yeah, the Sunday River Ski and Snowboard Club. Yeah, we haven't really had much time to think about the future of it yet, but that's been kind of the move so far.
And how much has that kind of helped them? It's made it grow quite a bit?
I think so. I think last year we were able to get, I don't even remember the figures, but basically like all that money just goes into like a fund where local kids can apply for grants. Like say a kid got qualified for nationals and doesn't maybe have the money to afford like the plane ticket, he can apply for a grant to get that paid for by the ski club. So, and I used that when I was coming up as a kid. Like I would definitely apply for grants for certain trips, and they came through for me. So it's cool to be able to provide that opportunity.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So are you, every time you go back, I mean, Bethel's only like 2,800 people. So are you pretty big celebrity back there whenever you get to go home?
Donnie is more of a celebrity than me, but for me it's cool just because we do know like a lot of folks in town now, so it's more about like seeing old friends and just connecting with people that you haven't seen in a long time.
Donnie's taking over.
Yeah, Donnie is more of the celebrity figure back there for sure.
So some main kind of takeaways for you to kind of give to other people, offer up. What would you say they can really take away to be more successful in their everyday lives, whether it comes into setting goals or kind of game planning for the future?
Right. Yeah, there's a ton, but I think like the two biggest ones would be like making sure you're passionate and making sure you're always learning something. So when it comes to passion, like I am the type of guy who like needs to make sure I'm getting outside, having fun, like getting some activity, getting some like energy outlets, and that just makes me so much happier and like able to work on stuff and progress. So making sure I'm like enjoying what I'm doing, and if I'm not enjoying it, making sure I kind of have some kind of outlet to get, just refresh and reset. So that's a big one. And then the other one, learning, to me, like you just have to continually learn, like and continually want to get better at whatever it is you're doing. So I'm the type of person who's not very good at being mediocre at stuff. Like I always have to try to be as good as I possibly can be, whether that's like a math assignment or learning something new, like playing hockey, which I started picking up on lately. But yeah, it's just about learning new things, keeping your like always broadening your horizons, and to me that just brings with it so many opportunities and so many doors to open.
Awesome. Well, Todd, you got any plugs? Where can people kind of follow along and keep up on the life of Troy Murphy?
The main one's probably just Instagram. My Instagram handle is @Troy_Murphy. You can follow Donnie on there too, Donnie Pelletier 207. That's probably it. I kind of am a little bit less active on the social media these days as life gets busier and focusing on other things, but I'm still on there sometimes.
And then Vimeo as well. They want to watch some
Vimeo for all my all my backcountry ski stuff. I'm pretty proud of some of that stuff. So yeah, definitely check that out.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, my man. I appreciate it. Thanks for being here, episode 1, especially
I'm honored.
with everything else going on. Like I said, I wanted to do this in person, but the next one.
I'm honored to be on episode 1. Thanks, Bob.
Well, thanks for coming on, and
look forward to seeing the next guest. Who's it going to be? Sterling Krishamana?
I don't know about that. We shall see. All right. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. Bye, everybody.
See ya.
Hope you enjoyed this episode, folks. Thanks a lot. Please like, share, and subscribe. This is your host, Bobby Carroll, signing off.